Hello and welcome to Are You Still Working? I'm Lisa Madden, and this week is our first recording with an audience at Avid Reader, a fantastic independent bookshop on Turrbal and Yuggera country in Brisbane. This episode has some really great information for writers, with 3 acclaimed published authors talking about how they get the work done. Courtney Collins, our presenter, her first novel, The Burial, was published in 10 countries and shortlisted for numerous prizes. Her latest novel, Bird, was released this year. Mirandi Riwoe is the author of Sunbirds, Stone Sky Gold Mountain, The Fish Girl, and The Burnished Sun, amongst others. Laura Elvery is the author of 2 collections of short stories, Trick of the Light and the award-winning Ordinary Matter. She's at work on her first novel, which you'll hear about shortly. Courtney met Mirandi at a writers' festival and Laura at a residency. There's a lot of talk about how useful writers' residencies are here, with some sage advice from Chris Neen towards the end. Thank you so much again to Chris and to Avid Reader Bookshop in Brisbane for hosting us.
So this podcast, Are You Still Working, exists because my grandmother Shirley would ask me every time I saw her, are you still working? And part of that was because she didn't think writing was a real job. So this podcast aims to let people describe in their own words what they actually do, but more than that, what they do when the work isn't working and where that energy and resilience and, let me say, grit comes from. Mirandi, if one of your grandparents says to you, are you still working? What do you say to them?
That's interesting. I was thinking of my grandma, and she died about 13 years ago. She would have been really proud, actually, because she's a huge writer, so she would have been very supportive and just wanted to know what the next book was going to be. My dad's a different story. My dad does joke around about me telling stories, making up stories. That's what I do as a living, is I just make up stories. So I guess I would just say I'm a writer of fiction. And actually, I guess when you've got your dad smirking at you saying you're making up stories, it's not like I can argue with him because I am actually just making up stories. He does say it in a nice way. He's joking around. I would talk about what I'm trying to bring to the stories too, I guess. He's Chinese-Indonesian. My mum's of Irish stock. So I would probably discuss it. It's about finding that space for a Eurasian voice and stories. Yeah.
Thank you. What about you, Laura?
Both my mum's parents died before I ever thought becoming a writer was an option. I was a teacher, which is a very good job to tell your very practical parents and grandparents, and I liked doing that for a number of years. My other set of grandparents, my dad's parents, I used to be, as a kid, running around writing plays with all my cousins and lining everyone up in the lounge room to perform bizarre Roald Dahl knockoffs and Paul Jennings knockoffs, all those sorts of things. So they would have known me as a real reader and a real writer. But my dad's parents, they died before my first book came out, which was in 2018. And what's interesting about my grandparents, who are, like I said, very practical, everyone else in my family are tradies and those sorts of things. But I've recently come into some diaries that my grandfather kept for about 40 years. And he wrote in these diaries, this is my mum's dad, every single day, what he did, the weather, the cricket, what he did at church, what he ate, what he drank, how much he spent on a haircut, how much somebody owes him, who the president of the US was, like big picture stuff. It was really fascinating to find these diaries because in my mind, his life 2 generations ago is so different from my life. He did shift work at a factory, had 10 children, no money. In my mind, that's so different conceptually. That gap is massive. But then somebody said to me, no, Laura, he wrote every single day, which is literally what I do not do, every day for 40 years. It hadn't occurred to me that, he was a writer more than I'm a daily writer. That diligence and that record keeping, why would he have done that? And I find that really interesting. So that's what I'm exploring for another project now.
Is that your new novel? Can you go there?
Yeah, I'll go there really briefly. I tend to overshare before projects are ready, and then I've been listening to a lot of other writers say they absolutely don't do that, but here we are. So my mum handed me this bag, like a grocery bag. She was like, you might be interested in these. And I'd already been thinking of some how writing a story that was connected with my hometown, which is Toowoomba in regional Queensland. And in the way that a lot of our writing comes together, it was like this converging with this, like smashing together. Yeah.
Well, thank you. What are you working on at the moment, Mirandi?
At the moment, I'm about 3/4 of the way through a novel about a Eurasian family again, and it's over 200 years. So it starts in 2050, goes back to 1850, and it's set in 4 different eras, like 50 years, 50 years, 50 years, 50 years, going back to 1850 when an Irish woman has a child with a Chinese man, but it sort of goes backwards. So we see what happens. One of the characters from Stone Sky appears in it. But yeah, it's interesting because I am finishing this and I've done a lot of research and I know where it's going. But in my mind, I'm already into the next 2 or 3 novels. Yeah, it's just like all over the shop.
So Laura has said that you don't write every day. What is your practice?
So I've written 7 novels and my practice used to be that I do all the research, and that could take a year or so, do all the research, and I love a whiteboard. I set it all up and I'd plan it out, and then I'd get started, and then I would do 500 words a day, including the weekends, 500 words a day. I wouldn't let myself go until I'd done that. Now I'm so much more loosey-goosey.
Yeah.
I am all over the shop. Yeah. But we have contracts. So you get the work done. I know I will get the work done. I've got a residency coming up soon for 3 months. Residencies are so good because you're not distracted by family and housework and just visiting friends every day for a coffee and lunch. Every day something comes up. And I'll go back to my 500 words in the morning, go find some lunch, go for a long walk. Yes, so I'll go back to this.
Fantastic. Laura, can you tell us about your practice? So you don't write every day. I've got that. But what does it look like?
Very different at the moment. I have a job which I have to go to 4 days a week, which I really enjoy, but it's a bit harder. I don't have a regular practice at all. I don't think I ever have. Even when we were doing the PhD, every day was different, every week was different. I have Wednesdays off, and we're here at beautiful Avid Reader, and on Wednesdays I write here for a few hours with a friend, and we just sit next to each other, and it really works. She likes it when I'm there. I like it when she's there. We talk for about half an hour when we see each other, and then we put our headphones in and we just try to get a few hours done. Mirandi and I sometimes do a nighttime write. We haven't done that for a while, so that's why she's laughing. It's hard if you have a job and other commitments or caring commitments, those sorts of things. Most people know that. But at nighttime for a while, during the day, we'd say 8 o'clock, let's meet together, not on Zoom, wouldn't look at each other, wouldn't talk to each other, just text and sit down at our desks in our houses at 8 o'clock and say, let's write for an hour. And something about that is very effective, because even if you faff around on the internet, that's your business. But at 9 o'clock, we'd say, how many words did you write? How did you go? A couple of friends have done it with us, haven't they?
And sometimes we'd swap things.
Or we'd swap a line or a little paragraph or something. But it was just knowing that somewhere out there, my friend was writing at the same time, and you knew that I could get to 9 p.m. and a little sprint. So that works for me sometimes. Also residencies, they are beyond compare for how much I can get done.
I loved this thing you've invented, companionship writing.
The nighttime thing.
What tweaked you to that?
I thought children are in bed and I can do an hour.
He was just encouraging each other. Let's just get on and we'll do it together and just get it done. Yeah, and that's how it started.
You both have done a PhD and you shared an office?
Yeah. Lauren loves to work like in a cafe or in the office or here with a friend. I've got to work alone. And I used to go into the office once in a while because you're given a desk, and I'd go in and I would just like talk. Poor Laura's got there for the one day between babies and work, and she'd be really nice. And then eventually she puts on her headphones and turns around back to her computer, and that's when you know time is over. So yes, we do work very differently, but we both got our PhDs done.
What was good about the PhD was that companionship as well. And we were there, I think this is at QT, at a really good time. I think we were very lucky to have this shared office space with some really terrific people. We both had amazing supervisors who taught us how to behave professionally, how to edit, how to revise over and over for 3.5 years, how to trust your ideas, how to narrow down the scope of what you wanted to do. That's really useful. It was very collegial and we made all these connections.
And we used to have meetings too of all the PhD students. Like sitting at home, you were never going to learn all these things by yourself to do with the craft or to do with the research or to do with the teaching or to do with just getting your PhD done or when things are due and not to panic about this or do that. So it was just really a very inspiring time. And I think most of us got published, like or got, something out of the PhD as well. Like Laura said, it was just happened to be a really sort of golden moment at QUT at that time.
So you say you learned to trust your ideas in that time. This is the crux of the podcast, right?
Yeah.
When did you learn to take your creative ideas seriously?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I would say now, I think for all of us, it was just that yearning to be a writer, to be published. You're trying to write something different, but something that is publishable. Like I learned myself where my strengths lay. Like I really wanted to be a crime fiction writer, but then maybe my strengths lay in other areas compared to really successful crime writers in Australia. So that's something you learn along the way, just your own limits and what you can do. Not just limits, but also your talents. But I think the big one for me would be to find out if you can trust your idea is asking your other writer friends. I think that is literally what I'll do, is sit down and go, no, this is just a little idea and there's this woman and and just see if
So you're
see if you get any
testing
bites.
it out.
Yeah, from the other. That's how I would test myself first.
Yeah, I think one way that I know to trust my ideas is that I have family, partner, writer friends and other friends who really have no idea what I do, but are very supportive. With time, you just get more confident, like you said, Mirandi, about what ideas will stick. Because I have lots of ideas, but if they just evaporate, you're like, that wasn't for me, or that doesn't have legs, or I'm not interested in that, even though I was for one day. You learn to trust that a little bit if your mind keeps going back to an idea over years or a number of months, even if you haven't written a word. That's when I know it's legitimate for me. Yeah.
I love that. I think of it as the things that won't lie down over time, just won't lie down.
Yeah.
Can you put yourself back in a place where you had the realization that for whatever reason the work was not working? Perhaps you'd written yourself into a corner or were in a hole, however you experienced that. What did you do to move from that place?
I do remember this really short story I wrote. I don't do like a lot of people write copious number of words and then they cut back and throw out that whole section and start again because they don't know where they're going to. I just will not waste time on that. Like if I was actually sitting down and just getting down as many words as I could, they actually would be rubbish. That Ruby, I do remember I had that one short story about Ruby and I don't know why I was so wedded to it, but I had the beginning and I remember running it by you because Laura, when we were in a Rise group and it was great. And Laura's very good at that. You were saying like Tony Jordan says, write down how many? 20 different things that could happen or how it can end. I think also a lot of stories are like, oh, I really want to write about this, but I don't know where it's going or how it's going to end. And I think you just have to give them time in your notes. And over time, because you're thinking about it a lot, you're like, oh my God, okay, that'll happen to her or she likes that or she's a cook or, like whatever. I think time and maybe consulting someone else.
I love that.
How do I know when something isn't working? I am very different from Mirandi. I'm very happy to write a bunch of garbage and then edit it later, although I might change my approach for the next book because it is time consuming. And the reason I throw words at a wall, one, there is something to be said for getting a bit of word count up, especially in the initial stages. My book, Nightingale, one of the characters is Florence Nightingale. And so that's what I've been working on for 5 years and I'm in the final legs of that right now. But for a number of years, I'd been writing this third character in Nightingale and I would just sit down at night for these hours or whatever and just be like, oh my God, this could be a scene that Jean is in. And I would just write a scene with Jean in it. And I did that for quite a while. And I remember showing my writers group this whole backstory of Jean. And they were like, very kind about it, but sort of like a question, do you think you need that? Anyway, maybe 18 months later, it just wasn't working, the book. It felt really false on the page. Anyway, one morning I just highlighted 8,000 words of her backstory and put it in a little document. And I thought it's always there. And I felt so good immediately. And then I told 2 people in my writers group, first group, 2 friend, Mirandi and Emma, and I said, guess what I've decided to do? All of that stuff is all gone, bar the things I needed to know from those 8,000 words. And they both looked at me and said, we did tell you that 18 months ago, but you needed to get there yourself and you needed to do all of that work. And none of it feels like a waste.
So thinking about the ideal conditions to write and a studio in Paris for 3 months sounds pretty dreamy. Have you experienced what you would say are ideal conditions before?
Okay, so my ideal time ever writing was I had another residency in Shanghai in a little studio for 2 months. I was writing Stone Sky Gold Mountain. And while I was there, I just wrote the brother Liu's part, because usually I'll just write A to Z, like the story will be A to Z and that's how I'll write it. But Stone Sky's got 3 characters. And I knew with Liu, I wanted his trajectory to get tenser and tenser. And it was perfect because I think there were 12 other writers from around the world there as well. And so I'd write all day. I was there with Josephine Wilson, but she was doing a lot of research in Shanghai herself instead of the writing. And she'd want me to go with her, but I was very committed to getting my 500 words done a day. So I would stay hunkered down until I did my 500 words. And then I would let myself out at 5 p.m. This is a more ideal day. Writing, 5 p.m., race around the corner to a bar that had Australian wine to meet the New Zealand writer. And that was like every day for 2 months. My family came and visited me at the 4-week mark, which was nice because all the writers there were so homesick by the 4th week. And it was just, that was perfect just to get the work done. For Ordinary Matter, my book here, which is 20 short stories, and each short story is about the first 20 times women won a Nobel Prize in one of the sciences up until 2020. I had 5 to go. I'd written 15 and the manuscript was due a week after. I was at Verona one time, different time from you, Courtney. So the ideal scenario, which I look back on really fondly, was this massive pressure, no time to waste. I had to get it done. I knew I would get no interruptions. So I was there for a week and I wrote a story a day for 5 days. That seems ridiculous that would be ideal, but I'd come down at dinner and everyone talks about what they're writing and someone would be like, did you write another one? I was like, I think I did. But it was fun because I was filling in these 5 gaps and I just had to sit in the morning and go pick one and see if it will work today. And I really enjoyed that because I'd done all the research. There was no other option except to write. No interruptions, these people cheering me on at night, and I could get it handed in the next week. And that is a really nice memory.
I love the idea of desert island in the day, dinner party in the evening. That works well for me. Verona, the writer's house, is in Katoomba. It's a beautiful historic house bequeathed by Eleanor Dark, a writer, out of her generosity and belief in writers and their need for space and time that we have all benefited greatly from. I was just in a convent in County Carlow in Ireland with Claire Keegan. Claire is an Irish writer. And Claire said so many great things, but she said, don't be afraid to go into the loss. I was working on something and I needed to hear that at the time. So what I'm getting at is, have you heard another writer or someone you respect and admire say something that you felt has opened a portal in you or has added years to your life in terms of what this is about for you and what your intention is for the work?
I don't know if this is what you mean, but I was writing my crime fiction. I'd done a master's and I'd written a crime fiction set in Indonesia. So I guess by then I'd already decided I was going to write about, I guess, the Asian aspects of my life. But it was a crime fiction. So. And then my PhD was going to be on the Eurasian courtesan in the Victorian period. Like I said, I was doing my PhD, meeting all these wonderful people and learning about the literary world as an industry in Australia. And around that time, I remember I was in the library with you, I think, and I'd picked up the Maxine Beneva Clark short fiction. You'd read it because she was across everything. So it was Borrowed Soil by Maxine Beneva Clark that made me realise what I wanted my work to do, which was looking at sort of being other, yes, and other aspects that weren't in fiction. So, yeah, I would say her work really opened up for me what I could do with my work.
When I was writing this Nightingale book, the thing that really opened it up for me was something that Mirandi Riwoe said to me about historical fiction, because Mirandi's written some exceptional historical fiction. One night, I had to get rid of a couple of characters who were real people in Florence's life that did not serve my story and hindered the story that I wanted, the plot that I wanted. And Mirandi just said, they were part of her story, they're not part of your story. And that was so useful. And the other thing, which is very interesting in these last stages when I keep researching her life and keep finding fascinating things, is Laura Jean Mackay, our other really great writing friend, who wrote The Animals in That Country a few years ago, the amazing book. And she said, I'm still researching that book, and it's been out for a number of years because I found something else. And I'm just like, I have to stop finding these interesting things. And she said, it's okay, just keep researching after it's published. And those things also aren't part of this story, but they could be part of somebody else's story. And that's so helpful as a historical fiction author of this book.
Thank you. I'd love to open to the audience for questions. So if you do have a question, just pop your hand up.
Thank you. That was really fascinating. What would your advice be? This is a question for all three of you individually, to a new emerging writer of how to make their way in the industry. Given your history and the way you have done further education, say someone's done a bachelor degree, what would your advice be to them?
My experience is that it's all about relationships, and you want to find, gravitate, magnetize people you enjoy hanging out with, quite simply. There's not enough money in it to hang out with idiots, is the short story. There is no certain path, and you absolutely make your path, and you make your path with your integrity and your relationships. And then I would say the way will be open. But I think strategizing about the industry's so clunky. It's so clunky. It's ever changing. It's propped up with scaffolding most days. People fall off, people jump on. Yeah, find your people in that, I think, is the way.
My big one would be enter whatever competitions you can. Penguin and Hachette have their emerging manuscript things. Queensland, the QLAs, Queensland Literary Awards, have an emerging manuscript competition. And I actually think they're probably an easier way to find a publisher as an emerging author. And there are quite a few, so be across them. And all the writers' centres, follow all the writers' centres actually around Australia, because they've all got workshops and advice, weekly advice, essays on things in the industry, and also do the workshops. I know Queensland Writers' Centre or Avid does it too, and Brisbane Writers' Festival, if they have workshops. The other thing I think is be across the literary journals, and I think it is important to have your own little community, because you can only hear hints from the other people going through the same thing as well. Our writers group, 4 of the 5 of us have been published now, and another one's happily gone off into another career, quite happy to not be a published author. So writers group, that's my other one, is a writers group. That helped us 100%, didn't it? You were talking before about perseverance. Like when I started writing, knowing me and what I'm like, I would never have thought I'd have the perseverance to be published, because there are so many knockbacks. There are so many knockbacks that I would have thought, knowing Mirandi 20 years ago, she would have just walked away after the first knockback. And to this day, would you say, Chrissy, we're all like published authors
Every week.
And you're still getting knockbacks, so you just have to like harden up as well.
So all of that. I would also say perseverance is so important. I remember I got published in a journal that I'd been desperately hoping to get published in. And the time I got published was the 20th submission to them. And maybe the same as you, I probably would have thought that I maybe wouldn't have stuck at it that much. And it wasn't until I added it up that I thought, oh, that was the 20th time. And so it's about defining what's enjoyable for you. And it might not be about getting published. It might not be about publishing a novel. It might be about something completely different, family history, whatever it is, that's the actual goal. The goal is not the same for everybody, but sticking with it when it's a bit hard, but also really enjoying it as much as you can.
Thank you so much for sharing your stories. It was really cool to listen to how you've gotten to where you are. I was just wondering about the residencies, so what they involve, how you apply for one, and at what stage throughout your writing journey would you recommend to look into something like that?
Just go first really quickly before you maybe talk about formal residencies, Mirandi. But when I say residencies, a few of us went away for a weekend Well, I've done that twice this year, I think, just for a weekend. And so when I say residencies, that could be what you or the person you're talking about might want to do. And we just keep to a few rules.
What are the rules?
They're like Varuna rules.
Okay.
And Varuna is this writer's house we're talking about.
Shush during the day and meet for dinner.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Do not interrupt people during the day. Stay as quiet as you can. Be mindful that other people are thinking and working and writing, and then gather together at night and talk. I've done a couple of weekends with friends at an Airbnb or someone lends us their house. And you'd be surprised just by being around 2 or 3 other people who are working. That's very motivating. I find that really motivating to be around them. So that's sort of an informal residency that you can do. And then there's formal ones.
There's Varuna that we've all spoken about. And Varuna is one that I know the first time I went to Varuna, it was for a novel that didn't even get published. So I was emerging. I was very emerging. You apply for their fellowships, and then there are the Creative Australia ones, like there's Paris and there's Rome. And then there used to be AsiaLink that did Shanghai and other Asian countries, which was brilliant, but it just doesn't exist anymore. And they are actually very competitive. But then, like, I know another friend is in France at the moment, and you see them on Instagram. If you follow one, then all the others will pop up. But there are ones that you can pay to go to. And she's at a fancy castle one or somewhere in France that she's paying for. And it's actually with other writers, emerging or not. Just all you need are other people who want to write during the day and then talk about writing at night. Because also, that's all we talk about, isn't it? We literally only talk about our writing. You must be very boring for other people. If not invited, they don't want to come. So, so there's all a different range, but Varuna's a very good one to get into.
And just to answer the question about, I guess, the value of it at whatever stage you're at, for me, being in a residency just was taking my idea seriously. There's actual space, there's a beautiful desk, and hopefully there's a view, and sometimes people feed you, and there's time, and it's really specific time. The time will end. You have to do the work while you're there. There's a sense of expectation. There's a sense of someone has sat at this desk before me and had this struggle and come up with something good. You really feel the effort that's in the room. And I think that absolutely elevates you, moves you from being a solo kind of person bouncing around the world with a lonely idea to this person connected to other ideas and other people. And it is a place that you can actually muster your courage. I think at any stage will enhance your life.
I'm going to put my hand up to just say I wouldn't rely on those formal residencies, because I've been a judge for the fellowships at Varuna, and it's really competitive and really hard to get in. People with big names get rejected from that because you don't see who's applying. All you've got is like a page sample or a few pages of their writing, and you don't know that you've just rejected someone with 20 books and 1 million awards. So I wouldn't rely on those residencies. I'd actually organise yourself. The most important thing is to find other writers to work with. Like Chris Olsen and Ashley Hay and I have just gone away for a week, booked a week away. Together we're writing. You don't need to apply and get rejected. You just go, we're going to do it, we're going to write, and we're going to do it together. And that gives you the community that you need to write. So I would not rely on any of those residencies. And you have to have a publication record to apply to the Australia Council anyway. So you can't actually just apply until you've got a book published. So it doesn't work.
That's great advice. We have time for just one more question.
Yeah, thank you. It's been really enlightening. Mirandi, you mentioned you have several novels in the works. I'm wondering if, like a painter, you do a bit of this one and then do a bit of that one tomorrow, or do you just start to finish?
Oh my God, I've been all over the shop now that you've reminded me. So I wrote a few crime fiction, and then I started the third one, but I didn't know if they wanted it. Meanwhile, I wanted to write Stone Sky Gold Mountain for an Australian publisher, for my publisher, Viva, at the moment. So I got in touch with the British publisher and I was like, do you want the third novel? Like, hoping they'd say no. And they're like, yeah, okay, give us the third novel. So all summer I quickly wrote that. I think I'd started Stone Sky for the Griffith Review because I had a Griffith Review grant for it. And then I decided I would write a novella about Anna the Javanese. So I wandered away from Stone Sky again and wrote that novella for Griffith Review, and my publisher was not happy about that. But I did hear the other day that Tim Winton has like desks in different areas for different works. And I'm like, I'm going to do that because I'd like to write a crime fiction again. I found that really fascinating.
Thank you for your attention. It's just been such a pleasure to have this conversation. If you would like to follow us on Instagram, we are at Are You Still Working Podcast for tips and tricks of the trade, let's say. Thank you, Chris, for your lovely warmth and hospitality. And thank you to my producer, Lisa Madden. And thank you all.